All right, so now we're at number 6. So number 6 is pretty obvious. Be punctual. But you wouldn't believe how many musicians are bad about this. So many musicians are late to gigs, late to practices, and they have all sorts of different excuses. I'm going to include don't make excuses with this too. Just do your best to be on time. If traffic happens, call. Call ahead so they know that you're running late. But do your best to avoid that scenario altogether. Because if you're on time all the time, they're going to remember that. If you're late to the first show, you're making a bad impression the first time. If you're late to a rehearsal, it's a little more forgivable, but if you make a habit of it, they might replace you just on that sole purpose. Be on time, be prepared, be punctual. So, number 7 is all about having the right tools of the trade, the right gear for the right gig. For instance, I have a lot of 6-string basses, if you've seen my other videos. I've made the mistake of bringing a few of those to traditionalist blues jams. Fundamentalist, traditionalist types of people have very strict rules and very strict ideas of what makes the blues or what makes jazz jazz. So if you show up to one of these events with a 6-string bass, you're going to get a lot of weird looks, and you're going to get a lot of comments like, don't you have too many strings on that thing? Or, that's basically a guitar, those kinds of things. You might just shrug those off anyway, and I've still gotten a gig out of a jam even when it was like that, but you could just avoid that whole scenario by having a 4-string bass that you bring to that. So for a blues jam, I'd recommend bringing either a Fender P bass or a Fender Jazz bass. And really, with most styles, you can't go wrong with those two options. Obviously, your gear needs to work. So you need to make sure that it's loud enough. You need to make sure that it has the ability to be quiet enough for some gigs without sacrificing tone. And then, I don't know, you just need to make sure it looks professional. So maybe if you have a $100 bass, it's time to upgrade it. Unless you got a really good bass for a really good deal. That's like a different story. You want to make sure that your amp is big enough for the gig that you have, but small enough for whatever stage you're on. Some places also have a space requirement, and you may want to have multiple options on amps so you don't take up the whole entire stage with an 812 stack at a coffee shop or something crazy like that. So make sure your gear matches the gig. Alright guys, so number 8 is all about the look. Like your gear, matching the gig is important. So if you're playing with a punk band and you look really nerdy and you're wearing your glasses and you don't have any sort of attitude, maybe you have a button-down shirt, obviously that's the wrong look for the gig. So you gotta use your common sense here. If you're playing a metal gig, you gotta look like you got attitude. Hopefully you have tattoos and you're muscular and you're like, rah! And if you're playing a blues gig, there's a lot you can kind of get away with, but you might want to be a little bit more classy than if you were playing a punk gig. So a lot of people playing blues, they wear a button-down shirt and they wear some sort of cool hat and sometimes sunglasses. So if you want to fit in, you can kind of do that. The other thing is if you're being hired by a performer, they don't want you to upstage them. So you may want to look at what the other band members are wearing when you go to a gig or if you're trying to fit in. And I've found that a black V-neck t-shirt and dark jeans and plain black shoes works pretty well for a lot of different types of gigs if you just want to have a default. Now, I play in a Green Day tribute band and I don't always look the part, but having the red tie helps, and having Converses for that gig kind of works. And then when I play my jazz gigs, I like to dress up a little bit more. Sometimes a button down's cool, but if it's an outdoor gig, I might wear something like this, where it sports the last jazz festival that I played or something. So really, you just want to look the part, you want to look professional, and I can't tell you how many gigs I probably haven't gotten knowing it's because I don't have the look. Country gigs are pretty big about that if you're doing modern country. You may want to have some sort of plaid. You may want to have the plaid button down, but that fits you pretty good. Blue jeans and boots I think there have been a couple times I haven't gotten callbacks because I don't own boots. So just keep all this stuff in mind and make sure you look sharp. So number 9 is one I've alluded to earlier, but basically there's no room for ego on stage, especially if you're a sideman. Sometimes if you're for the front man, you want to be a little cocky and a little showy, but if you're a sideman, you got to be humble. You're just there. You are supporting somebody else's show. So lose the ego, forget showing off with all your crazy chops, play the song. So that means sometimes you will be playing nothing but quarter notes. If you play the blues and you play in a pretty chill band and you're trying to keep the volume down and everything, you may literally be playing quarter note walking lines. Jazz is the same way. Sometimes players will want you to throw in a little bit more, but let them tell you that. If they say, hey, you can do a little bit more, then do it. Because a lot of times playing simple will get you a lot further. You gotta lose the ego and you gotta show some restraint and self-discipline to play what you know is right for the song. But also be confident in what's right for the song. If you go to a metal gig and everybody's playing a whole fast flurry of notes and you're playing whole notes, that may not be right either. So use your judgment, but chances are you're overcomplicating stuff, so keep it simple. Alright guys, number 10. We've made it all the way to number 10. So this one is know the rules, know your limits, and know your limitations. So basically, the first one, knowing the rules. Some gigs have a lot of rules. Some bars, some clubs, and all corporate events. So if you get hired for a corporate event, they will usually send you a contract that gives you some very specific rules. And if you break one of those rules, you'll get fired or not rehired, one or the other. So follow the rules in those scenarios. And some bars have rules. I remember there was one that had a specific rule, sorry Tom Petty, but not to play Last Dance Mary Jane. And they actually said they would fine you for playing that song. Knowing the rules is very important. So knowing your limits, this applies to a lot of things. If you're trying to be on stage and you're like, I want to do a show kind of thing, and you're trying to do dance moves and you do too much and you trip and you fall, well, that'll stop the entire show. Now that's a silly example. A better example of knowing your limits and limitations is with drinks. If you decide to drink at a gig and there aren't rules specifically saying don't drink at the gig, then know your limits. If you start missing notes after 2 beers, just drink 1. And then knowing your limitations has more to do with the music. If you are playing a song and you're trying to play it note for note, but there is a crazy, crazy bass fill in there and you spend all week working on it, but you're still not confident that you have it at the end of the week, don't try to play the crazy bass fill. Simplify it. Most people don't know the actual bass part, and if you play something similar, they'll be fine. And sometimes knowing the limitations of the band is also important. If the drummer is not playing the same drum part as the song, certain bass lines will not work. So if you're locking in with the bass drum of the recording, but the drummer on a gig is playing an entirely different bass groove, it may just sound completely incorrect to play the groove from the recording with that. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in and watching this entire video. If you made it all the way to the end, please type bass with an exclamation point, and yes, that is a shout out to Adam Neely if anybody watches his channel, in the comments. So I hope to see you all on the next video, and keep playing, and let me know if any of this stuff has helped you, and you can also add in the comments below if you have any more advice for any other aspiring bass players or sidemen. Thank you, and please subscribe to the channel. You can click this little button right here, and if you'd like to watch more videos, check out what I've got. Bye.